Liberty School District Governing Board meeting is called to order today, Wednesday, June 18th. The time is 4:30 p.m. We're at the Jerry Roby District Facility. 5 board members present: Board Member Schmidt, Board Member Zimmerman, Vice President Kenyon, Board Member Strincioni, and myself, Michael Todd. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Strincioni, can you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Members, next item on the agenda is 1.3, the approval of the special meeting agenda.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve this agenda consistent with Board Policy BEDB and temporarily suspend the governing board policy with which this agenda may be inconsistent.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the special meeting agenda. If there's no discussion, we'll take a vote. Board Member Schmidt,
Aye.
Board Member Zimmerman,
Aye.
Vice President Kenyon,
Aye.
Board Member Strincioni.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. Will show that item 1.3 approved, 5 yes, 0 no. Next, members, is item 2, our consent agenda. 2.1 is being pulled. We don't have it back from legal review yet, so we're going to skip that. The only thing on the consent agenda will be item 2.2, personal action items. The attachment is in board docs.
I make a, sorry, I didn't, if you're ready for a motion.
You're ready, go ahead.
Okay. I make a motion to approve item 2.2.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 2.2, the personal action items. If there's no discussion, we'll take a vote. Board Member Schmidt,
Aye.
Board Member Zimmerman,
Aye.
Vice President Kenyon,
Aye.
Board Member Strincioni.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. Will show item 2.2 approved with 5 yes, 0 no's. Next up will be item 3, discussion 3.1, discussion, consideration, and approval of the Trust Policy Chapter 5, second read. Ms. Castellanos.
How about now? Oh.
Yep.
All right. Good evening, governing board members. I'm here today to discuss our second read of Chapter 5. You all received the finalized version of this yesterday. So I know that hasn't provided a lot of time for review, but there wasn't significant changes from the last one that you had received on Friday. I will go through these, just what we are changing. Okay, so we've already approved quite a bit of the changes. And so I'm just going to go through some of the most pertinent changes from this last read. Before we start, is there any questions that you all have for me so far?
Just a question. So as we go through them, if we have a question or a comment, we can address it at that time.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we can start on page 15. On page 15, this is within the compulsory or 5-103.a. This was throughout the policies that we've done over the last 2 weeks. I've tried to make everything consistent. So this is our first mention of the revocation of open enrollment status. During our meeting last time, we had talked about how we could possibly revoke open enrollment status and have that language with inside these policies based on the fact that for tardy attendance purposes and or disciplinary infractions, and we wanted a policy around that. After the review from the trust and from our legal team, they're asking that we hold off on putting that policy in place so we can adopt it now and then have further legal review before it's implemented, or we can go ahead and strike all language around the open enrollment for this read and then bring it back for the revocation of open enrollment and bring it back at a separate time.
Mr. President, if I may.
You may.
I feel more comfortable just removing it until we're ready to approve it.
Okay, so just for us keeping track, so that we can attempt to potentially approve this tonight, So if we just keep a list of page numbers of changes potentially, I'm just thinking how we're going to address a 200-page document in a motion. Because right now, this, is it the last sentence that we're going to be removing under B? Additionally, if the student is enrolled under open enrollment, violations may result in the revocation.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that is what this notebook is for here. I was going to go ahead and keep track of those page numbers, and then I'll mention like which pages and policies that we are amending. Does that make sense at the end? Okay. So this is 5103.A, and it will be the last sentence in B, the disciplinary actions.
Sorry, can you read the policy number one more time?
5-103.A.
I just want to add that I'm also comfortable with just removing it for right now and then address it at a later time with legal review.
Okay. So if we move on to page 17, 5-104A, procedure homebound or hospitalized students with chronic health problems. In this section, we went through and did the distinction between under certification for under 90 days and certification for over 90 days. Because of the language throughout the documents, we did go with the appropriate licensed physician, that language, and that aligns with the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment language. It also aligns with federal language and aligns with the Department of Education language. And then under that, we did under 90 days, the certification can come from an appropriate licensed healthcare professional. And then if we move on, same policy under page 18, and it is it's number 5 under that policy. Yeah. So number 5 in this, under A, number 5. So this is having the certification be retroactive, but basically because of ADM and how this would affect that, we can't make those certifications retroactive. Okay. All right. And then under enrollment of 5-105, open enrollment, page 19. We look to remove the word shall. And because that is in the statutory language, we have to keep that in place. Okay. Page 20 of the same.
Okay, I have a question.
Okay.
So this numbers, from page 19 to the start of 20, numbers 1 through 4, though that's statute.
Yes, that's the shall from statute.
So resident students, this is open enrollment though.
So in this section, this is directly, the section was taken directly from statute. So the statute that's listed here, ARS 15-816.01, is the enrollment. So this is enrollment. So the district shall enroll any student who applies for enrollment at any time. The district shall give enrollment preference to and reserve capacity for the following. These are the followings that we shall give enrollment preference to.
Okay, because then on page 20, where we list resident students, this is again, we're giving enrollment preference to and reserving capacity. Some of these are required by law, but then that last one, students who are children of persons who have employed by a school in the district, that isn't listed. Oh, that's right. Sorry. It's listed in a different spot now. Never mind. I read this earlier today. Okay, we're good.
It gets really confusing because of the shall and may, and having to have both sections in there. My question for you all will be on page 20, if the enrollment preference is in alignment with what you were asking for.
The concern I have is,
The listed priority area.
yeah, is the ones that were required. So,
Those are on top. So resident students, students returning to the school from prior year, like, I wanted to make sure that we gave those enrollment preferences. If we're going to have a list of priority areas, we need to talk about all of them, right? Not just the open enrollment status. So
okay, but like
these are-
McKinney-Vento, we don't have a choice.
Correct.
So I guess my question is, should it be as part of the ranking because we don't have a choice? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, I can see what you're saying.
Mr. President, if I may.
You may.
Yeah, I think it's good to have them all spelled out here, just because it's already putting, I know this is technically under the may section, but it's also reiterating we're not going to step over the ones that are the shalls. So it's just putting them all back in order, correct? And then after the fourth one, there's where the fifth, sixth, and seventh, those are the ones that we could rearrange the orders. But 1 through 4 are the requirement. Okay. I was just trying to understand.
I understand what you're saying, but that's not actually what it says, because it says that they're listed in order of priority. So if you read that, that means that the first one is more important than the third one. But we know that the McKinney-Vento one, you have no choice. So that one would always take I mean, the other ones too, we have to enroll a resident student. So it's like they have equal weight, basically, but that's not what it says. It says it's in order how they're listed. So I think that's the issue. Not that we don't know that they're all equal weighted, but that's not what it says.
Mr. President, Mayor. For the ones that we have to, like the district gives enrollment, that's for the foster care. Where does it say that it's ranked?
So in the section on page
So why are they
20,
up here then?
yeah, where it said the very last section in red. Well, I guess it's the very last section that's underlined. It says the district gives enrollments preference to and reserves capacity for all of the following listed in order of priority. That was based on the discussion that we had on June 7th, where we were asked to like give me a priority listing. You're right. We don't have options with the first 4. Like these are, we will enroll these students regardless of capacity, right? But these last 3, we do have options.
And I guess I'm a little bit confused because I didn't think that for open enrollment, we have to reserve capacity for siblings or even kids from year to year, because in another district in the West Valley, they had kids, they said, we don't have room for you next year, that have been going to that school for a long time and parents cannot take them there anymore. So, but I agree that the way that this is written signifies essentially that resident students have a higher priority than McKinney-Vento, and essentially they're equal. I think in order of priority has to be for groups of students that we do not have to enroll.
Okay. So what would be the change you'd like to see there? Would you like to see that whole section stricken, or would you like to see the first section removed, the first like 4 removed, and then the open enrollment preference is for these students in this order?
I mean, students in foster care have to be enrolled as well, right?
Their school of origin is what
Yes.
is required.
So, I mean, if, as you say, according to the statute, that students returning from a prior year have to be enrolled, really the only one that's not required, because would be the last one, students who have a parent on active duty, isn't that statute as well?
So before we get too deep into like the legal requirements, I'm not an attorney, right? So I
Right.
can't give legal advice, and our attorney is not here to provide that legal advice in this moment. So I can do is refer us back to the statutes of the shall and the may. But I can't.
Mr. President, if I may.
You may.
So I think we're like making this muddier than we have to. Like everything's already covered and the paragraphs above it. We're making it more difficult by trying to list it in preference because it's already separated on who we can and who we must enroll. So I think we should just leave it as that instead of trying to rank them.
I think I agree.
I'm okay with that as long as we either, remove the listed in order of priority or just add the, oh no, we did the ones with the district. So I'm okay if you just want to remove.
So that would be under 5-105, open enrollment. We will be removing on page 20 everything that references the district's priority area or priority enrollment.
We're just removing what's in red though, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And let me, just to be clear, I'm trying to make sure we're straight for the motion at the end. So we are going to be removing the very bottom paragraph that states on page 20, the district gives enrollment preference to and reserves capacity for all of the following listed in priority area. So all reference to priority area will be removed throughout this policy, because there's going to come up several other times in here where we've got priority areas. Okay, moving on to page 21. This is also reference to the priority listing area, so we will remove that. So page 21, it's open enrollment 5-105A, procedures. And if we can just remove all sections that refer to a preference listing in policy 51-05. Okay, so moving on to page 23, there are two areas in this policy, and this is 5-105.A. Page 23, right above where it says revocation of open enrollment, it was a discussion that we had about transportation fees, right, for students who have open enrollment and being able to charge a transportation fee. We have been advised that that should probably go through further legal review because it could provide some liabilities for the district. So that language was removed.
So just for clarification, that whole last sentence is going to be removed?
No, the language is already removed. So if you look at the comment section, under the third paragraph in that first comment, it says the following edit was removed when transportation is offered to open enrollment. That was already removed prior to you getting this.
Okay, so what I would like to see though is the district may provide transportation to students accepted for open enrollment when required by law. Because this leaves it open even when the district is not required to do so. Because that was part of the discussion. That's how we got into charging.
Yeah, and this most likely needs to go through further legal review under the revocation of open enrollment status, and we can ask about that transportation piece, primarily because legal is telling us like it needs a deeper dive.
Okay.
So again, it is the will of the board. So if you all would like to keep that or to change that language, we can, but I'm just letting you know that legal has told us to pause. Asked us to pause, not told us. I apologize. Okay. And then again, in reference to the revocation of open enrollment on this same page, that all will be removed. And that's 5-105A on page 23, number E, or letter E will be removed in its entirety. Moving on to page 27, 5-202, students with disability. We have, okay, so we inserted some language about access to education. So that is under, you'll see that under the 5th bullet point down. So I'm sorry, 6th bullet point down, you'll see students' ability to access education. And that language has been changed throughout. Okay, moving.
On page 28, it's just a typo, I think, so I don't know if we have to write it, but to access a free and appropriate education, the A is missing.
Thank you. Okay, and then looking at page 34, 5-203, students with disabilities. The trust has offered the intro paragraph or intro sentence that Ms. Zimmerman had requested. Okay. And then on that same page, we had initially removed this big section from birth through 21 years of age. And because that is directly in statute, they've asked that we keep that there. Page 36 of the same policy. Under B on the very top of page 36, the district must make reasonable efforts to obtain informed consent. We were looking to change that language to shall. However, based on the legal review, they're saying they do not recommend changing the language for that. Page 41 of the same policy. There was an edit here removing the reference to a child graduating at or the age of 22, receiving a regular high school diploma or the age of 22. They are suggesting that we do not delete that language. And then on the same page of 41, at the very bottom, you'll see underlined in red, the district standard ability achievement discrepancy model that is referenced here. This is the model that is currently being used, but you do have the right under the state to use 2 other forms of verification for disability. And that's also referenced here. So I didn't want to block you all in. So I went ahead and called out what the model is that you're currently using, and then left the reference to statute of you being able to use whatever model is most appropriate. Page 44 of the same policy is the same conversation about standard learning disability or standard ability achievement discrepancy model.
Okay, Mr. President, may I?
You may.
Okay, so I still have a concern with how this is written currently, and I just think it needs a little tweak, because the way that I read it is essentially, if a student doesn't achieve adequate progress for their age, they could qualify. And I don't think we want to make that statement. So what I'd like to see is a child may be determined to have a specific learning disability in one or more of the following areas when they show, so this is like, so we're crossing out kind of the first part and then inserting show a significant discrepancy between ability and achievement.
So we are specifically talking about one.
A,
Under-
we're talking about 1A. Yeah.
And so the change that you're asking for is the child does not achieve adequately for the child's age or meet the state approved grade level standards. So that is the sentence you're asking to,
Yes.
okay.
Because, you know, there are a lot of students that don't meet their grade level standards. That does not necessarily mean that they have a learning disability. And how we determine a learning disability is a discrepancy. And it's going to give other opportunities, B and C, to use those other ways. I just think we need to specify that this A is the discrepancy. So it would cross out that first part of the sentence and then say, a child may be determined to have a specific learning disability in one or more of the following areas when they show a significant discrepancy between ability and achievement. And then you could keep going with the rest of that sentence.
May I ask where this language originally came from? This came right from the trust, right?
Yeah, so the language originally, this is the original language of the policy that was written by the trust. When we were inserting the standard ability achievement discrepancy model that's up top, what the trust had, or what Jennifer McClellan at the trust had mentioned to us was that these were the specific places where they need to show the discrepancy, right? And so the up above says how we determine that the child does not meet the state approved grade level standards for their age, right? That we determine that by the SLD that's above.
Yeah. I understand what Ms. Zimmerman's saying, but I'm comfortable leaving it as is. I think it kind of covers all that, as you said, above in the paragraph above, it's talking about the discrepancies, but also their age is very important. That I think that needs to remain in there, and just I'm okay with it how it is currently.
Mr. President.
You may.
I'm only okay with it because it has the may. They may be determined based on this stuff. It doesn't mean they're going to be determined just because they have a don't meet the state approved grade level standards.
Mr. President.
Yes.
So I'd just like to note for the record that I am in disagreement. I think that we are opening up the district for parents to come back and say that you can qualify my child. They can go through a due process claim. Like I have a significant concern with this particular wording.
Moving on to page 47 of the same policy. Under E1, you'll see that we've added the governing board will annually establish and approve policies and procedures within regard to the allowable pupil teacher ratio. So moving on to page 74. And this is under 5-204. Students with disability and procedural safeguards. we added in that we'll be using the district will use Arizona Department of Education's guideline for determining a surrogate parent. Want to make sure. Is everybody caught up? Are we all? Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, then moving on to page 81, 5-205A, gifted education programs. We've added in as detailed in the gifted scope and sequence of the district's website. Okay, moving on to page 96, 5-210, special interest material.
Mr. President, can we go back to page 90 real quick, please?
Sure.
I just want to bring this up. We did have quite a bit of discussion about it being an equal, first it was a majority percentage and then an equal percentage. And I just want to be clear that I certainly want as many parents as we possibly can to serve on a committee. But my concern by being so specific, saying equal, if we can only get one parent to serve on the committee, are we only allowing one person on the district to also serve on the committee, and those two people are going to make a recommendation on curriculum? I'm just not sure that I'm comfortable with two people deciding curriculum or recommending a curriculum to the board. I'd like to have a robust committee, and I just wonder if we could add a caveat about how we, try to include parents or something, but doesn't tie our hands. This is a very specific number.
Mr. President, if I may.
May.
Yeah, this is something that I brought up last time as well. I was just concerned about that equal percentage. I would be in favor of this just saying that the parents are included as a voting member and just kind of get rid of majority or equal. I want parent involvement as much as possible, but I can see where this can really kind of make it hard for our staff to be able to approve curriculum and go through those steps.
I agree with Mr. Kenyon in removing the line of the wording for the equal percentage and just saying that parents are part of the committee. So that, as both Member Zimmerman said and Mr. Kenyon said, we're tying our hands here if we say they have to be equal.
Okay, so on page 90, the revision will stand as, this is 5-207. Page 90, section A, we will remove the equal percentage and replace it with parents are included as voting members.
Can you say that again?
5-207, page 90, section A, we will remove the word equal percentage and add parents are included as voting members.
So it will read procedures to encourage parental involvement on all selection and adoption committees such that parents, I think we need to take out may comprise an equal percentage, that parents
Are included as voting members.
are included. Okay.
So on page 95, 5-211, class size. The superintendent shall make staffing recommendations annually within the budgetary process that are individualized to the district's adopted ratios or maximum number of students per class. So that was the conversation around the gifted and around the pupil teacher ratio for gifted and for special education. On page 99, 5-212A, procedures, student clubs and activities. In section C on page 99, we had a pretty robust discussion about allowing non-curricular student groups. And within that, you all had asked me to draft some language that might say why a particular group may or may not be allowed within, and giving the principals rights to revoke those. After this has gone through legal review and review of the trust, they've stated that we might want to halt that change until we get some more detailed language and an opportunity to explain to the board some of the ramifications, equal opportunity options as well for these non-curricular groups. So they are suggesting that we keep this as the district does not permit non-curricular student groups. Does not.
Yeah, so
Right. So that's what I'm, after having the discussion with the trust this morning and Jennifer and legal review, they're stating that we should most likely look at this and say the district does not permit non-curricular student groups until you all have an opportunity to sit down with an attorney and understand the full ramifications.
They were
That-
pulling back the language that you added and going back to the original as how it was. So right now it looks like it was crossed out, but really just, sorry, mine is not in color, but in the one that is not in color, it would just go back to everything that's gray is gone and just the solid black would be there. So the district does permit, no, sorry, does not permit non-curricular student groups, period. That's it, right?
But then would we have all non-curricular student groups must? Are we going to leave that in, even though we're saying we're not going to allow them?
I would suggest
Removing it.
that we revert back to the original trust policy language.
Which is this, correct? Leaving it in?
The district does not permit non-curricular student groups.
And then the rest would be removed. Yeah. So everything under that sentence would be removed all the way down to D. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
I feel like this is backwards. I feel like it originally said to have them, and we argued not to have them.
The last meeting that we had on June 7th, there was really robust discussion about allowing them in because we didn't want to exclude a chess group. But again, because of the other language that was asked to be put in here, we need to have a deeper dive with legal before we allow for them to be in.
Ultimately, I think what legal explained is that this is a very slippery slope to allow. If you allow one, you have to allow every non-curricular group.
Oh, I agree. I'm
So
just
they're saying
confused.
you're better to just keep all of them out, and then you don't have a problem. Because there could be, if you allow one in, there could be something come up in the future that we haven't even thought of that wants to come in, and we can't stop that.
Right. I'm just confused because if you look at the comment, it says to leave it as it is, and with the stuff marked out, that makes me believe that we should read it as the stuff marked out as being marked out.
Right, so I think we got this yesterday, and you had a conversation with the trust this morning, so
Yeah,
that's
Oh,
the
okay.
changes.
Aren't quite aligning with what is the wording that I'm saying right now. So I apologize. I needed to get some clarification on some of these comments so that I was fully prepared to come in and have this conversation with you today. Through that conversation is where it was like, hey, it might be best to just go ahead and say that the district does not permit non-curricular student groups for now, and let you all explore this policy at a later date and how you might be able to allow it with it staying in the integrity of the district and in alignment with what the district values. So page 99, 5-212A, procedures, student club, we, under section C, non-curricular student groups, the district does not permit non-curricular student groups will be the wording there. And everything else will be deleted. Okay, moving on to page 105. This is policy 5-213A, procedure for district-sponsored events. We added in the students' demonstration of good citizenship and appropriate conduct. So that is the language that you all had requested for the approval of sports eligibility.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Okay. Just on page 104, just because we added a third thing, it says students participating in any interscholastic extracurricular activity must meet both of the following criteria. I would just remove must meet the following criteria. And then I just wanted to be clear that, for the public and transparency, that we are changing it from a D to a C in order to play sports, and that the district and principals will need to be very clear in their messaging to parents and to students at the beginning of the year, because that is a pretty significant change. In order to help support this, as I, thought about this policy, and how it will affect our teams. And, certainly there have been times where teams have had to forfeit because students were ineligible and things like that, that maybe the district consider doing a grade check prior to tryouts of a sport, to try to eliminate some of these concerns that may arise with the change in I can see Amy's like, you cannot exclude them. I can see on your face.
I was trying to hide it.
So, I can see that, but they are going to be held accountable for that grade. So, it's just something that I think principals are going to have to work really closely with their junior high families at the start of the year to make sure that they understand this change.
I also have a question on that. I don't think this should be limited to just sports. It should also be other extracurricular activities. To do those extra things, I don't think we should just pull out sports. I think it should be all extracurricular activities. And this specifically spells out interscholastic, so I think that's calling it just sports. But I don't think it's fair that we would remove an athlete from their event, but we would let a non-athlete continue to participate in something.
Okay, in order to make that change, I would need to have some time to go through the policy and see where the most appropriate fit for putting eligibility on, what are we saying? Eligibility on it wouldn't be non-curricular groups, right? But it could be any after-school activities.
It
Right.
says activity in here. It says extracurricular activity.
Right, but it says interscholastic extracurricular activity. So I think we're just missing a comma, maybe, right? But this section specifically states interscholastic extracurricular activities, which is sports. I'm just saying that as I look at this, I think somewhere in the policy, and we can bring it back. I would like to get this approved tonight, but in some of the other things, we can bring it back and extend that letter C grade to other extracurricular activities.
Okay,
I don't want that to hold up approval. We need to get this done and get it to the trust and move it. So if you'll just make a note, and then we can clean it up with some of the other.
page 117, 5-303, student records. From this point forward, you will see a few of these comments that say JM. Next to them, that is Jennifer McClellan. She added some language throughout that is consistent with the updates in the trust in May 2025, so just last month. Page 126, 5-303B, procedures. This has to do with the opt-out policy for FERPA, opt-out policy. Page 131, 5-304, staff interviews of students and searches. In our discussion on June 7th, on June 7th, the district did not have a current policy for providing random drug testing, but the board may adopt that policy. And then you'll see further down the page on 5-305, some of the copyrights have been removed from things that we made substantial changes on. So page 133, this is
If I may.
5-305.
Hang on, we got a question.
This is just a clerical thing on 131 for the district. Should be adopt instead of adopted.
We need to keep track of those for the motion, correct? Or are we going to not worry about clerical?
I think clerical you can keep. We won't need that in the motion
Okay.
unless it's a substantial. There's a few of those T-shirts that are very substantial. You see, whoa, but I don't think that's one. We'll be fine with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Page 133, 5-305, Student Code of Conduct, number 21. You'll see bullying and cyberbullying. We went ahead and added in the language that Board Member Zimmerman had suggested. And then page 135 of the same policy, we, in order to describe the use of cellular devices a little bit more in line with the current technology, we moved to personal devices and other electronic communication. So moving on to page 156, 5-401, procedures for police interview and notifications. Under section B, you'll see where the trust has updated their language. And then page 186, 5-409, prohibition of harassment, intimidation, and bullying. The electronic communications language has been updated, and the cyberbullying, and then the bullying prevention. So all of that language was changed to be in alignment with the Student Code of Conduct language that we just reviewed. And that is the end of the changes for the trust policy, chapter 5.
Mr. President, would it be okay if I read the notes of the proposed changes and then make a motion that indicates, refers to the notes that are mentioned previously?
I think that will be fine. Let's give it a shot. This will be a little tricky, but we'll get through it.
Okay. So the notations that will need to be changed for chapter 5 will be page 15, policy 5-103.a, and we are removing the last sentence in section B. Page, do you want me to go? You tell me if you want me to go slower.
Good. I'm just typing as well, so we have them all
Okay.
saved.
Okay, page 20, policy 5-105, removing the language that the priority order of open enrollment. And then page 21, which is 5-105.a, remove all language referencing a priority order for open enrollment.
Referencing a priority order.
For open enrollment.
Okay.
Page 23, 5-105.a, so it's the same policy, just a different page. And it is the removal of the revocation of open enrollment, which is letter E.
That's
Can I edit?
revocation of open enrollment? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
It seems like you need to add something.
And all references to revoking open enrollment throughout chapter 5.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, page 90, policy 5-207. I believe it references A to remove the language that states parents may comprise an equal percentage and replace it with parents are included as a voting member.
Okay.
Page 99, policy 5-212.a. Section C, non-curricular student groups changed to say that the district does not permit non-curricular student groups and remove anything that references to them. And then do you need the one where we remove the word both, or do you consider that a clerical?
I think that's clerical.
And we can also just say
Yeah.
all clerical edits and errors.
Okay, and correct all clerical edits and errors that were mentioned during the June 18th meeting.
Okay. Is that all?
That's all that I wrote down.
Can we remove all children as well?
Oh, yeah, I thought that was a clerical.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It hasn't been mentioned in this meeting, so when we point it to mention
Oh,
in
good
this
point.
meeting.
Okay, so on page 188, we will be remove.
It may be different on here. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We will remove a typo that states all children. And that policy number is 5-410.
5-410. Okay.
Mr. President,
Yes.
can I ask a question about
You
the
may.
clarification real quick? The one on page 104, 5-213, did you say D or C in the section for,
Sorry, tell me the number again.
it's one on 104. It's section 5-213,
You're talking page 104?
Yes.
Okay, so what's the policy?
5-213.
Oh, and I
A.
said 212.
No, I don't know if you said, I thought it was D, and I see Mr. Kenyon has C written down, so I wasn't sure what you said.
D.
You said D? Okay. Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay, I tried to capture these typing so we can keep track. Let me read them back to you, Ms. Zimmerman, and let me know if we've missed anything. Page 15, policy 5-103.a is remove the last sentence in section B. Page 20, policy 1-105 is to remove the language that the priority order of open enrollment.
The policy is 5-105.
I fat fingered it there. Okay. So policy 5-105 is remove language regarding the priority order of open enrollment. Page 21, policy 5-105.a, remove all language referencing a priority order for open enrollment. Page 23, policy 5-105.a will be the removal of letter E, which is the revocation of open enrollment and all references to revoking open enrollment throughout Chapter 5. Page 90, policy 5-207.a, remove language that parents may comprise an equal percentage and replace with parents are included as a voting member. On page 99, policy 5-212.a, section C, change to say the district does not allow non-curricular groups and remove any references to non-curricular groups. We will correct all clerical errors and additions mentioned during the June 18th meeting.
Mr. President, if I may.
Yeah, I'm not done yet.
Okay, I apologize.
And then on page 188, policy 5-410 will we remove the typo that states all children. Vice President Kenyon.
If I could just real quick look at that page 90, 5-207A. Page 90, 5-207A, talking about the parents being included in a voting member. Just so that, I know this seems a little bit nitpicky, but I know how this can be used down the road. We had stated parents included as a voting member. I would like to say voting members with an S, just so that somebody doesn't say, oh, there's 5 parents, that's 1 vote member. So just adding the S in there, voting members.
I do have that listed as remove language that parents may comprise an equal percentage and replace with parents are included as a voting member. As voting members. Okay.
There you go. Yep.
All right. Any other clarifications?
Did you say remove the, where's it at? Oh, the words both of in chapter 5, 2-113.
I do not have anything in 5-13.
Is that a part of the clerical error?
I don't know.
I think we were just considering that a clerical
Are we?
error because it's
Alright.
just the wrong word.
It was removing words.
Let's look at.
It's changing it from both. all.
104.
Is it changing it from both to all?
Oh, yeah, it's instead of both of, since there was 3, I don't know if I was going to say both, just remove both of, and so it just says meet the following criteria. If that's clerical, okay.
I think you should just change it from both to all. Instead of saying meet
Yeah.
both of the requirements, just say meet all of the requirements. And then that encompasses if we add anything later, it's all set already.
Can I ask that we add to that list under the revocation, or not the revocation, I'm sorry, the priority order, if you can give me permission to remove all reference to priority order for open enrollment as well throughout the chapter.
I'm fine with that. I'm trying to get this page 104 clarification. So it's going to be, what's the policy?
I think it's 5-213A,
213A. We're going to change section D.
section D. Yep.
Okay. Change.
Change the word both to all.
Okay. Okay. Are there any more? Hearing none, we can take a motion.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the trust policy chapter 5 with the edits as discussed directly prior to the motion, and it will be effective July 1, 2025.
I'll second.
All right, have a motion, a second. Let's make sure you have that motion. You got it all typed the way you want it? the way it was, actually the way it was said, not the way you want it necessarily, but sorry about that. Okay, the motion is to approve the trust policy, chapter 5, to be effective July 1, 2025, with the noted changes just prior to the motion, which is a total of 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 significant changes, and then the clerical errors and additions mentioned. All right, if there's no further discussion, we can take the vote. Board members, yes.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, just one last thing that I'd like to let you all know before, once we get this approved, the trust will need about 3 to 4 weeks to get the website up. So you all will have PDF versions of these documents posted to your website. That way, all of these policies are in one place. And then by August 1st, you will have the, by the end of July, you will have the website for the trust policies.
And in the meantime, we'll ask IT to post one PDF on our district website, just on the governing board, so you can, we just won't have a link yet to like the policy bridge. We'll have to get to the trust version, and that's what takes the time. So for the short term, we'll have a PDF version on our local website for everybody to see.
Mr. President, could I ask 2 things?
You may.
Okay. The first one, it would just be an ask if we could do the chapters separately for people. I just think it's going to be easier to find something than 600 pages that they don't know what they're looking for. And then the second thing would be the part that we approved at the last meeting for you to reference the different policies. So will we essentially need to reapprove all of them with those changes when you bring them to us?
I don't believe so. I mean, I would have to ask legal to make sure.
Okay.
I don't believe that would need to be like a reapproval, because it's really just kind of more of a website thing than it is any substantial changes to the policy themselves.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second. There was a little clerical discussion there. I think that's fine. Board Member Zimmerman, I don't know if you want to include that we also post this to our website within the next day or so we can get these on there for parents, just to give IT the permission to do that temporarily. I don't think it's necessarily needed, but it would maybe clean it up a little bit if you want to amend it. If you're good with the way it is, I'm fine as well. Okay. All right, so we have the motion and the second. No further discussion. We'll take a vote. Board Member Schmidt.
Aye.
Board Member Zimmerman.
Aye.
Vice President Kenyon.
Aye.
Board Member Strencioni.
Aye.
I'm also, and I will show that Chapter 5 of the trust policies is approved with a 5 yes, 0 no vote. Thank you all for your work on this project. Ms. Castellanos, thank you. All right, moving right along. Item 3.2 is discussion consideration of the governing board to discuss and consider the approval of securing the governing board securing the Arizona school administrators as the search agent to assist the board in a search for interim superintendent. So members, we did get back from legal the approval for them to do an interim search. We have Mr. Jornstad here again. Really what we need now is I don't know if you need any more presentation from him, but we need the motion to sign the agreement to allow the Arizona School Administrators to be our search agent for the interim search position.
Are we discussing it, or is he giving a presentation?
If you want an additional presentation, Mr. Jornstad, or you want to do another presentation, or just,
I think
you're on.
what I have to prepare goes more toward the next agenda
Right.
item.
Right. So the first step is just approving them based off of his last discussion. The contract remained relatively the same, I believe. Did legal send that to all of you guys?
No.
Okay, then let's,
Well, that's my question, is we don't know how much it costs.
sorry, I thought that was sent to you already. It was not attached in here. 1 second, I'll get it for you. Okay, members, we're in session. I'm going to email this all to you right now so you can look at it and see it. And my apologies. I think this one got dropped with some of the vacations. I thought it was forwarded to you. My apologies. It should be in your inboxes.
Mr. President, if I may. So just for everybody's sake of time, I think we're looking at the very last page of this, correct? It's where the compensation schedule, and that's what's in question.
That's correct. That's Exhibit C.
Mr. President, if I may again.
You may.
So looking at that, it looks pretty reasonable from what I've remember from last time we did a search. And so I'll give my board members the time they think they need to review it, but I'm ready for a motion if there's no discussion.
Thank you.
Could I ask a few questions?
May.
So just for transparency's sake for the public, the compensation schedule is $3,500 plus expenses, and it includes 3 search meetings. So does that include like the meeting we already had in this one, or it would only include after we sign the contract? The 3 meetings would start to count.
Okay, I don't believe the first one would count, my understanding. Mr. Jornstad, you could say if this one counts.
This one would count.
This one would count.
Because once you've,
Right, because we're going to move on to
assuming,
3.3.
I hate to do that,
Yeah.
that you pass this, then we will, in our next agenda item, get to work. And that's 3,500. I'll just say that that's, when I spoke with Dr. Tai about this, he said, you know, you've had searches where things have happened and suddenly there's become an extra meeting or 2 extra meetings. So he said, don't see that happening, but that's where he added a little more onto what as a possibility. For example, I had one district where we had 4 finalists, And then 2 days before the interview with the finalists number 4, number 3, and number 2 all got positions in other districts. And they went from 4 finalists to 1, and that called for an extra meeting to discuss and redecide how to handle that situation and so on. Things happen.
Any further questions? All right, hearing none, we can take a motion.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve securing Arizona school administrators to be the search agent for the interim superintendent position.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second to approve item 3.2, which is securing the Arizona School Administrators as a search agent to assist the Liberty Elementary School District in a search for an interim superintendent. Last call for discussion, otherwise we'll go to a vote. All right, hearing none, we'll take the vote. Ms. Schmidt,
Aye.
Board Member Zimmerman,
Aye.
Vice President Kenyon,
Aye.
Board Member Shinsioni.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We will show that item 3.2 passed with a 5 yes, 0 no vote. Now the fun begins. We're moving on to 3.2, which is discussion consideration of the interim superintendent search next steps in process. Remember, this is a opportunity for us to work with Mr. Jornstad to create and discuss the components of the position listing, documents, discuss any special questions we may want to have. This is a relatively open forum at this time, but I believe, Mr. Jornstad, you have a presentation you want to?
I have a short presentation. First, I must say, your previous discussion was to me, anyway, I'm a nerd on policy, was very interesting and really, though, was impressive. The close attention you're paying to board policy and its ramifications, especially when you're talking about kids and teachers and what's allowed and not allowed. I've spent decades of my life living those policies in tense situations, and so I commend you for the attention to that.
Thank you.
So if we'll look at, we have a number of decisions. I'm going to say we because we're involved in this together, but I'm not a decision maker. I always say the board is the decision maker. I facilitate. And I try to stay by those guidelines as much as possible. But there's some decisions to be made and some factors to look at in making those decisions. And I'll just run you through those a little bit, and then we can start in. And I have them right here. Okay, so this is the slide phase I showed you a week ago, or a little more than a week ago. Phase 1, develop the profile, timeline, and process. That's what we're doing tonight, June 18th, instead of, it was originally June 17th when I sent it. Number 2, posting, recruiting, and the community survey if used. Probably we won't use a community survey we're going to have a short timeline. 7 to maybe 10 to 12 to 14, it depends on how long you want it listed out there. Phase 3, board screens and selects applicants to interview. One decision you look at tonight is, do you need to do that screening process? That again would depend on how many applicants that we end up having. In phase 4, then the board interviews the applicants and so on. Those would go through as usual. But we'll look now and more specifically at 1, 2, and 3 and talk about some of these key factors in making these decisions. So key factors would be the application, the simplicity or complexity of it. If we make a lot of demands on the application, then that requires more time for people to meet those demands. On the other hand, if you're looking at an interim superintendent who is going to serve maybe up to 9 months, maybe not, based on the discussion I've heard, maybe you don't need as much depth of information up front. And we're also looking at, more than likely, people who have been superintendents who have had that position, and some of the other things maybe don't need to be looked at as closely. The number of candidates. If we decide to interview 7 candidates or 5 or 4 or 3, that affects the process a little bit. If you interview, I've interviewed had boards interview as many as 8. When you interview 8 people for a superintendency, that takes a whole day. That doesn't happen at a meeting that starts at 4:30 and you're interviewing a certain candidate at 9:30 in the evening and you're tired and they're tired and it just doesn't. That's something to consider as well. The use of a screening meeting. I'll just kind of try to lay this one out for you. Again, if we have a lot of candidates and we require an extensive application, then for the board to screen those extensive applications, if there's 7 or 8 of them, I've had those kind of meetings last, it takes 20 to 30 minutes per application. Well, 8 times 30, you're at 240 minutes, and suddenly you realize that's 4 hours without a break. And so is the question that you'll face, is that a meeting you need to have? If we get 4 experienced, qualified superintendents, I spend some time vetting them in advance. Some of these will be people I know. I think most of them, frankly, will be people I know and have worked with and am familiar with their careers. I could screen them and say, these meet all of your requirements. You really only need to, we had 7 applicants, but my feeling would be you need to interview 4 of them, and you can find one in the 4. If you interview 7, of course, that takes, setting the screening meeting aside, an interview of 7 people, or 5 or 4, takes a certain amount of time. Again, the decision being made by the board would be, I've had boards take a 90-minute interview, and that's fine with 3 candidates, but that's still 270 minutes. That's 4.5 hours. I've had boards use 40 minutes when they're interviewing 8 people. They use 40 minutes per interview. That's still 320 minutes. That's still 5+ hours. In other words, it's all day for you. So you have to think about that as well. I'm just trying to kind of throw some of these factors out since we have a short time frame. And then timely contract negotiations. Sometimes contract negotiations that seem like they could be very simple sometimes then become less simple, and you might plan on having a superintendent in place by August 1st or by July 24th, and then the contract negotiations drag on. So those are just some factors. And now I'm going to suggest a couple of options for time frames, if you feel that we're ready to move to that, or do you want to ask questions about these factors?
Go ahead. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple questions, I think, before we get to our choices. In terms of whether we need a screening meeting, is it possible for us to be sent the names and like where they were a previous superintendent, and kind of your recommendations, or is it really something that has to be done in a meeting?
It does not have to be done in a meeting, but confidentiality has to be honored in a discussion like that. And the board would have to be very cautious in calling up one another and saying, gee, did you see this? This one looks really good. What do you think? And you're violating open meeting law when you do that. So,
Oh, absolutely.
I don't mean to lecture you on that. It's just my job to remind you of if we do
course.
certain things, we have to really be careful to be aware of the rails that protect the
Yeah.
candidates as well as the board.
And so I just wonder if that's something, that the board would consider to just kind of speed up the timeline since we do want to get somebody in place. If that would be something. And then I think those are my questions for right now,
Okay.
if that could have been.
More questions may well surface as we go into some of these, but so I'll show you a couple of options I put together, and you may not like either of them and want to go to a third, but this will give you a little idea of the scope. So I have the gold option here. June 17th, or i.e. today, June 18th, we decide the listing timeline, the process details, and by the 18th or 19th, I'm saying depending on how some institutions are closed on the 18th. We would like to have that listing ready to go. I've done a lot of preliminary work on, so I have a draft of how it might go, kind of assuming you might vote to use us. I like to be prepared, but we would list it. Then one way to do it is to close applications on June 27th. That's not a long time to keep it open. And that is, June is a Friday. It's about 9 days from now. And that's very quick, and that's only possible, I'll say, if you do some things on the application process, such as not requiring candidates to have a reference letter, a current reference letter, because some of these people are retired superintendents. They haven't been looking for such letters for a while. But in lieu of that, we could ask, and we always ask this anyway, but we need 3 references of people who are ready to speak to your qualifications. That's a phrase I use, meaning if I call them, they're going to take the call and return it in a timely manner. Many of these people I have in mind who have, when I say I have some people in mind, we have 7 candidates that we've, either Dr. Ty or I have spoken to about interest in the Liberty position. They're all superintendents. 5 from Arizona, 2 from out of state who have moved to Arizona in the last year or so. But they all have prior superintendent experience, some of them many years, almost all of them many years of superintendent experience. And they're interested in an interim position. I can't speak for all of them. I would say most of them are not interested in a permanent position. I won't say all, but so they would be ready to go and ready to interview on a short and do the application on a short time frame. Then we could do, for example, we could close the applications on the 27th. And if you, this is a fast time track. And then I would contact which of those. This involves you trusting me to screen them. So you might or might not want to do that. We could interview on July 1st. Again, this assumes all the candidates are able to make it, but that's a little bit before the 4th of July weekend. That weekend kind of takes everything out of the mix for the board as well as the candidates, so I left that out. But then by July 2nd through 10th, you could have contract negotiations. Ideally, at your July board meeting, you might be ready to vote on a contract and maybe to have a person start. This is a fast track. You could have a person start by July 21st, let's say, just say, giving them another week to get started. Okay, so that's fast track option. Yeah, that still conforms to the law, that still vets these people. Option blue, same first 2 steps. The board screens applications. We have a screening meeting on July 1st. Then the board decides whom they wish to interview. Then July 7th, candidate interviews and selection. Another 10 days for contract negotiations. Then July 21st, board votes on contract. Or you wait till your next meeting, but you don't seem to mind, and I say this with the humor it's intended, that you don't seem to mind having extra meetings. But which is a little bit unusual, but on the other hand, this is an important thing. That if you want to get someone, I mean, school starts, what, the 2nd week in August, something like that?
August 1st.
August 1st, okay, well, so that would get a superintendent on board, depending on how quickly contract negotiations go and the board votes. You could make, ideally, I guess the superintendent could start even the day after the board voted, but again, that would be something you would work out with contract negotiations. So this first one really says there'd be about 1 more meeting. That one said there would be 2 more meetings. Blue says 2 more. They're both pretty quick. Now, we can slow this down a little further if you want to as well. I'm just pressing this quite hard. I do have one factor that I have to bring in, that I have for 3 years, our family, my brothers, kids, grandkids, we've been planning a family reunion in Seattle. And after a long time of getting everybody to agree on a date. We did agree, and that's July 8th through 13th. And that's why I'm avoiding those days, because after 3 years of this planning process, and I say without pride, I'm the oldest one. I think there'll be a 1-year-old there as well, but I have to do that. So that's why I kind of ducked around. I also ducked around the 4th of July a little bit, because that's family time. And, you know, I'm speaking for myself as well as you. That's a big holiday where families get together, and those are, again, you see the key factors. And I mentioned we have 7 right now who have expressed interest. That doesn't mean all 7 will apply. Again, though, that's why a shorter application is helpful to people too, who apply on a short time frame. During the regular process, you would give people maybe 6 weeks to get an application done. Then you can go out to people and get letters, and you know how it is with letters. Sure, I'll write you a letter. 3 weeks later, I need that letter. Oh, I'll get it to you soon. Another week goes by. So sometimes it's like pulling teeth to get even your friends to write letters for you, especially for a position like this.
Mr. President, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Union.
Yeah, so I'm glad that there's interest. You said possibly up to 7 right now. I've had a couple interested parties ask me about it as well. I would like to know who to direct them to.
Me. Do you
And
have,
so what
and you,
email, phone number, what you're comfortable?
too, and they can call me. My cell phone. This is my cell phone.
Don't put it on the public record. Sorry.
Yeah.
We'll get it. We'll have staff send that out. To
Okay.
the board.
Yep.
Yeah.
Your chairman has it, so you can. He has my email as well. I'm on email, even retirement. What's retirement? But
Yep.
I'm on email all the time. It just, if you've been doing it for 50 years, you can't break that habit. But
Oh, that's
just
fine.
maybe not 50, maybe 30
Yeah, just my,
years, no email.
opinion on some of the key factors. I think simplicity obviously is going to be kind of the key, with the understanding that I personally want this person to have the experience behind them of being a previous superintendent. An interim position, especially right now in our district, I do not think is a test phase. It's got to be something for somebody who has that experience. Number of candidates, I think probably 4 or 5. I would like to keep it low as possible. I do like the idea of being able to screen all the applicants as a board. And I know if we're trying to speed this up, then that kind of hinders, unless we can do something, as Ms. Zimmerman mentioned. And I do know in previous superintendent searches, and it was for the permanent, we had, a binder with everybody's information in it, and we were able to go through that and take our time going through that. But we're kind of expediting this part of it, so I'd understand that. But
And I would provide you at such a meeting, I would provide you not only with their complete information and responses, but also with a rubric for scoring that kind of tends to 1, 2, 3, or 4, 4 being best on all these different parts of it. And so if you follow that, then you end up with scores spread out a little bit invariably, and you get a sense of who really is what we're looking for and who isn't. And one thing I don't put as a key factor, because we talked about that last week, is we're looking for best fit and a transparent process. So that's our big overall guidelines. So I didn't list best fit down here, but certainly that is a key factor. And I would suggest on the job application saying for the criteria for people, superintendent experience. Because otherwise you might get a lot of people, well, I've never been a superintendent, but this would be an ideal. No, it's not an ideal time. And so if we just say superintendent experience required, then those people won't apply. They may well want to apply, for a permanent position later on, and I would suggest you do consider it something, because there's some people who haven't been superintendents, but who have vast experience at the district level making the top decisions and are really ready for that next step in their career. And some of them are eager and energetic and really want to do it right.
Mr. President?
Ms. Zimmerman, go ahead.
So a couple things. First, would we be developing the questions when we interview the candidates?
You would be, the process that we've used over the years, which we found works pretty well, is during a meeting that we have, if we have a screening meeting, for example, at the conclusion, then the board would give criteria for questions. I have a handout that suggests here's some criteria, here's some other ones, but you would say, we want a question on academic achievement. We want a question on student discipline. We want a question on financial planning, key factors. Or I would suggest for something like this, we want a question on what would you do as an interim superintendent in your first 60 days? Because that's a little different coming in as an interim than coming in otherwise. Things like that. But once you've given me those areas, then I make the questions. You don't see the questions until we come to the interview. The advantage of this is no one can say, and I can say this without an audience here, rumors start so quickly, and if board members have the questions, then invariably, and I've lived this, someone says, oh, sure, so-and-so, that was his favorite or that was her favorite, and she or he gave them the questions or gave them hints as to what the question. This way, there's no chance of that because you know the topics of the questions, but any good candidate could sit down and say, there's going to be questions on these 10 areas or 12 areas. You're knowledgeable. It's pretty obvious what they're going to ask you about. Probably, what about staff recruitment and retention? Things like that. And a good candidate will prepare bullet point answers for every one of those and 20 more. But that's the process I use for that.
Okay. Yeah, no, I can understand that. Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Mr. Kenyon in that one of the qualifications for an interim is that they have to have had superintendent experience. And I would add successful superintendent experience as a caveat to that. I am in favor of, as an expedited process as possible that also maintains the integrity of the process. And I would really like to consider doing a screening kind of virtually, independently, because if you have a rubric and we, completed a rubric, because I assume, again, things that would be brought to us in a notebook, everything is digital these days. You're not essentially bringing us a notebook. You might, but, everything is going to be digital that these candidates are submitting. Could we do that screening process independently, individually, send you our rubrics, and then you kind of essentially select the candidates based on the rubric scoring? I think it just gives us more time personally to process and to read carefully things that are submitted rather than us sitting in a meeting together and like, okay, we need to get through this in X amount of time. And again, I believe it would expedite the process in general, which is what I'd like to see. As I stated before, I wanted someone in July 1. That's clearly not going to happen. So for me, as quickly as we can move is beneficial to our staff to begin the year.
I think we could create something virtual, and again, we would just try to set up some guidelines so we are really clear that we're not violating open meeting law, and whether one thing you suggested, that was interesting, you could score them, report your scores to me, and then I could take it from there. Or you could prepare in advance, we could get together for a 1-hour virtual meeting. And because it sometimes happens after people have scored, and they say, well, what do the scores add up to? And I say, before we add up the scores, is there a candidate that you want for sure to interview? And I will ask them. And often of the 5 board members, maybe 2 or 3 of them will have the same candidate they for sure want to interview, or the same 2 they for sure want to interview. And sometimes we don't the scores don't seem to matter as much as you all agreed that of these 7 or 5 or 6 we looked at, there were 2 that just stood out above everybody else. But often that's kind of thing surfaces in a meeting. But I could go, that would just be a couple ways of doing it. We wouldn't have to meet at all if you didn't want to. I could.
And as part of that, either screening that happens, in a meeting, an executive session, I just want to be clear for the public and transparency that all this would be happening in executive session. Would we be getting those, would we have access to their reference checks? Like a summary of them that you said you collect?
Yeah, I have to look, we have some language in the application itself where they agree to have their records checked, and I've got to check that language to make sure it says we can share in details what that record revealed. They might not be signing off to reveal, they're signing off to get checked. I have to hesitate to say they're signing off on that information would be shared. Other than that, certainly, in the past, I've sometimes called a candidate and said, this is an issue, or I found this, vetting your candidacy, I found an issue here that occurred in your past, and, the board's I have to inform the board that this is a concern, and will you want to discuss that in an interview? And sometimes they say, yes, I will. Other times they say, nope, I'm going to withdraw. But I've had some things, people have been fired and there's been a community uproar. And when you dig down into it, it maybe it was something many superintendents would have done, and they would have been fired, but they were doing the right thing. But sometimes the right thing is rewarded with termination. I've had superintendents, for example, fired because everybody in the community knew this was a bad teacher. The superintendent in a small community said, if this person is so bad, why isn't something being done about it? And the principal said, I will. If I can move on this, and they move on it, do an improvement plan, do everything legal, terminate that person legally. The board votes 5-0 to terminate it. And then later on, it turns out that the spouse of one of the board members, that was the sister of this other person. And next thing you know, the pressure from the community mounts, and there's a meeting, and the board fires the superintendent.
So if we are not,
I'm just saying that's the extreme thing that can happen.
yeah, no, I understand. I just want to make sure that as a board, we're doing our due diligence. So if we're not able to see the reference checks, essentially, are you going to then come to us with a general statement about something that we should be concerned about?
Yep.
Okay.
And I would rather make that statement in a meeting than to send it, send it electronically. Once you send something out, it's out there. And one of my friends in IT says, information wants to be free. It tends to find its way to freedom. As I could reference the previous meeting, for example, but
Yeah, if I may, that's kind of what was my biggest concern about all these being electronic documents as well, with the whole packet. That's why before, the last company we used had a physical book, and they basically said, you can go through this, but obviously there's no sharing. Nobody else's eyes are supposed to be on this. It's strictly confidential. You're not to discuss this with anybody, because some of those applicants didn't even want where they were currently working, knowing that they were out looking, searching for another position. So, there's a lot of different factors in this, but
that's why ideally is, excuse the interruption, why ideally an in-person screening meeting. There's a lot of those. And then you're in executive session, so you can really be freewheeling in your discussion about the candidates. And I can be freewheeling in my responses. Where if it's happening online, great care then has to be exercised.
Yeah. And,
Mind having a screening meeting. I'm just saying that's a meeting cost to you. But if you're getting a leader for 9 months, it might be worth incurring that cost.
Mr. President?
You may.
I just had a couple questions. I think most of us are on the same page. We want to try to get it done quick as possible. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I would hate for us to pick somebody and then they have to start working like 5 days and not even meet the principles or anything yet. So I think the most time they have before starting date is important. Question I have is about kind of like the board screen, the whole process. Let's say we want 5 candidates, right? Do you send us everybody who applied and then we screen for the top 5 candidates and then we move forward? So if we say 5 candidates and only 3 people applied, then we just skip the screening and go straight to the interviews?
That would be a possibility, certainly, because some of these people I have in mind that I've just suggested, I've just said Liberty is going to open an interim position. They're familiar with Liberty, and they said, well, I would be interested. Now, when it comes right down to it, if they're taking the first 2 weeks of July in Hawaii or something, they just might say, you know what, this timing isn't going to work for me. If we got 3 and they were well qualified, I think you could go to interviewing them then. But if you get 7, I don't know that you want to interview 7. If you get 5, you can, that's where that screening meeting comes in.
Yeah, I guess that was my question. Like when we set the number of candidates, so do you send us everybody that applies and then we whittle them down during the screening session?
During screening session, you get every applicant, unless someone applies who isn't a superintendent, then I would say don't waste your time on that. They didn't meet the qualifications. But otherwise, if they met the criteria in a screening meeting, you screen them. And we do that with physical paper then in a screening meeting. And that it does take a while, but then the board can say, every candidate who met the qualifications, we looked at their information. And we had a rubric, we scored it with the rubric, we discussed this extensively, and so on.
I would be in favor of doing an in-person screening. I think it's much more secure. It's so easy to just have an email get forwarded, whatever. Also, to your discussion about rumors in the community, oh, this board member got together with their neighborhood or a group of parents and did this. We're tasked with a lot of security, protecting some of these folks who may currently have other jobs but want to come this way as an interim. So I think in person would be best. I'm looking though at the gold plan because I do agree we need to move quickly, and we're up against the first day of school almost in either plan. But if applications close on June 27th, I might propose to the board we look at the 29th, 30th of June to do some screening and then carry on with that schedule for July 1 for candidate interviews and selection. But we would just take the gold and basically between June 27th and July 1st, add a day or 2 to come into the district office and do some screening.
So
Would that,
The,
would your team have, I'm sorry.
oh no, I was just going to say the 30th is a Monday, so the 29th is a Sunday.
That won't work.
So maybe
You know what? I apologize. I was looking at July on the calendar. So June
30th.
27th, they'll be done. That's a Friday. So yeah, we would probably come in like the 30th. That would be it.
And then maybe July 2nd to give, candidates, if we just set the interview date for the application process so that they know if they're chosen for an interview, like it's going to happen on this day. Do you think that
would be part of the application packet then.
Okay.
You'll be screened on this date and you should be free to interview on this date.
A quick question. If we close it on what you proposed, if they do it on that Friday, is your team going to have enough time to do all these background screens and everything on them for us to talk about it on Monday?
No, that squeezes us. There's 5 of these people I've talked to have been very recently superintendents in Arizona, and some of them, frankly, I've worked with directly on some various projects, lobbying or other things for many years, and I would not have as much of a concern about what's in their background because they've been in a public position in Arizona for a long time, and if there was something in their background, it would have come out. There's a couple of candidates from out of state, if they, what I would do following this meeting, I would contact these people that I mentioned. I would do that tomorrow and say, are you going to apply? Because if you are, then I need to do some due diligence. Doesn't mean we'll release your name as having applied, but if they said yes, then I would go ahead and it costs a little money to do these things, but the couple who are out of state who have superintendent experience, certainly, but I don't know them. And I would want, if we're going to proceed this quickly, then I would want to do that background check, which is part of and transparency, that's part of an expense that you as a district gets billed for. But it's safety and security and avoiding surprises is, to me, worth a little bit of money.
But, maybe we would only do a background check on those that we were going to interview.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but see, if we wait, I'm just thinking about what he's suggesting. If we close on the 27th, screen on the 1st, and 30th, and interview by the 3rd or 4th, then sometimes it takes a couple days because we use a professional security company. When we say screen this person, then they go through a lot of data checks, and generally sometimes that comes back the same day. If we get them in the morning, sometimes it takes another day, depending on their volume of what they're doing. But they take great care in doing this because we trust them to take that care. That's why I was thinking if some of them I might have them checked in advance, just because I don't want to run into, we're going to interview them, but we don't have the data back yet from the security check.
So this is a little extreme, but if we close interviews on the 27th, this board likes to have meetings. We've even had Saturday meetings. Do we look at coming in on a Saturday to screen and then give you some direction on background checks if one of these out-of-state people that you don't know, we could get that done first part of the week and then schedule interviews like the 24th or 25th, but that'd give you a couple days, maybe even the 25th or 26th. And that would give you a couple days to do backgrounds on those that you don't know.
Yeah, no, I could,
Because
especially
if we screen one out, there's no reason to pay for a background check on somebody we're not interested in.
no, so that's
right,
true
so-
too.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting?
But I'm sorry, Mr. Todd, you said the 24th or 25th, but the applications don't close till the 27th.
Sorry, my calendar went to June again. Okay, so
That's okay.
so it closes on Friday the 27th.
Yeah, I feel like you probably need to give people a week.
The 28th. No, the 4th or 5th would be that's going to be July. That's not going to work either.
Well, that's why
No.
the July 2nd
sorry.
date that you talked about.
Yeah, I think probably because of July 4th week, we need to screen on June 30th and potentially interview on July 2nd. I think as you get close to the 3rd, people are off.
Or they're taking, certainly that Thursday they're taking off.
Yeah.
Because the 4th is a Friday. Okay, so you were talking about if we close on the 27th, could we screen on Saturday the 28th? Is that what you mentioned?
That's a thought, just to get us the screening process, to give you some time to do backgrounds on anybody that we might need to do a background.
That would likely give enough time. If we notified on June 30th, we could almost always get that back within 2 days. It's because it's mainly done electronically, but these are people who can dig deeply. I mean, we can all Google on the surface and find certain things, but they check with the national crime thing. I mean, they dig pretty deeply. The databases that we don't have access to. And that's why making an application that's simple rather than complex. I mean, sometimes we have 4 or 5 essay questions for them to answer. That takes, if you're going to write in a 200-word answer to an essay question as part of a job application, that isn't something you just say, you know what, I'll just knock that off in 10 minutes here. Mm-mm. So if we limited those questions a little bit, especially based on the fact that these are experienced leaders, then that'll get a speedier return of the applications.
And again, this is the whole screening meeting. Oh, sorry. And again, the whole screening meeting's only if we get more people applying than the number of candidates we want. Correct?
Yes, since you have this time frame, because I've had issues where, well, no, only one district where they only had 3 candidates. And when the board met to screen them, they really didn't like any of them. And so then that, we had to open it longer and recruit more. But then this is a little bit unusual in that there are certain people who don't want a full-time job anymore, but they think, you know what, doing this as an intern for 7 or 8 or 9 months, yeah, I could do that. It'll help people out. And I'm already getting bored with retirement, but I don't want to commit to like my life to the district. And these are most of the ones I know anyway. They make a commitment. They make a commitment. So if what I'm hearing then is close apps on the 27th, possibly screen on Saturday the 28th. Say if we started at reasonable time in the morning, probably within 2 or 3 hours. If the application is a little shorter, we could handle that. Then I'm hearing possibly Tuesday, July 1st.
The other option is if you're closing on the 27th, and I know this really jams you, but basically we could have a meeting on the 27th at 5:30. You would have hopefully everybody except for maybe one last straggler.
No.
And we could do the 27th and then keep everybody there Saturday open.
Normally I say 5 o'clock or something, then I might say noon on the 27th. We have to have it, so I have time to, if we're going to have that physical meeting, so I have time to get, or people can get the paperwork in order and.
Personally, I prefer Friday night over killing a Saturday. That kills a whole weekend, but it's up to everybody else.
And just to avoid all of that and give you time, do you think it's possible to do it on the 30th and then interview on the 2nd? So there's a day in between.
It's possible by my schedule. I think I have a dentist appointment on the 2nd, and this would be a great reason not to enjoy a dental appointment. Question I would say would possibly might be, and again, applicants would know this in advance. This is when we're going to do this. Normally, if someone's coming, no one's coming from out of state. We're not listing this out of state. So it's not like someone suddenly has to make flight arrangements the weekend of the 4th. They all live in state here. Most of them, I'm thinking they all live in Maricopa County. So it's not a issue. If we say in advance in the application paperwork at the end, I have standard statements which say it's due by this date, there's going to be screening on this date, and so on. After the screening interview, we will make public who the finalists are. And I don't know if do you use the West Valley View? Do they take a great interest in your district?
You mean for posting positions?
No, I wouldn't post in the West Valley. I'm just saying if I'm going to be dealing with a reporter, the public at all.
There's a few around the valley that will call from time to time. West Valley View's one. There's a couple others as well.
I dealt with the West Valley View all the time. I was at Saddle Mountain for years as the superintendent. Right. They had me on speed dial, sometimes for good news.
My only thought when I suggested the 27th or 28th is that gives you all the 30th to hit the background check in the morning. So to give you the 30th, the 1st, and if we do interviews the 2nd or 3rd, it gives you 2.5 days versus.
I don't think we want to go to the 3rd, in all frankness. That's a
I agree.
Thursday. People will
agree.
be dashing out of town.
Right.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'm just putting this out there only so that everyone is informed, but I am out of town from the 24th to the 29th. So if we did it on the 30th, I could be here in person. If we did it on the 28th in the morning, I could potentially call in. But on the 27th, I don't think I'm going to be able to because I'm going to be on the East Coast. So it's a 3-hour time difference. I also realize that this needs to move. And so that's fine. I just want to put that out there. And I am, not personally offended in either way. Whatever the board needs to do, they need to do. But this all came up post everything, and we already had things planned. So I'm trying to work around as best as I can. But
Should inform you that we're not doing this search. The Washington Elementary School District is looking for an interim starting right now. And they're looking at a very aggressive timeline as well. I don't know that, I know a couple of the people I talked to would not be interested for various reasons in that district, but there's some others who potentially could be. I didn't ask them about it, but I'm not even talking to them about it. If they don't find out about it, oh well.
Ms. Zimmerman, thank you, or I'm sorry, Ms. Schmidt, thank you for your information. I certainly would like to have you involved in the process. So
Mr. President.
maybe we do the 30th, but again, that'll be for the board to decide. Ms. Zimmerman, go ahead.
I will also need to be virtual for this. So if we can consider how to allow that to take place, because I certainly want my voice part of this discussion.
My biggest concern on any of these is the electronics. And in the past, we had some legal advice that we should never do these resumes out electronically. So
No,
they
I
need to be
would
done
probably
here.
try to figure out. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but my feeling would be I would have some kind of delivery. These however many applications there, I would have them delivered to you. A lot of concerns then.
It's the chain of custody. It's the security of the stuff.
I have a physical meeting, all their paperwork, when we're finished, I take all that back, it goes in the shredder.
Ms. Zimmerman, when are you back?
I will not be able to be present. Like, I am out of town.
I mean, when do you come back from being out of town?
I'm going to be gone for a significant time.
Okay.
So we're really.
We can work on that, at a different time behind the scenes. How to, if I just listen, or I don't know if there's a program that will allow me to just pull it up for the time being, in a meeting, in a Google Meet, like somebody share their screen.
So you would not be able to have papers delivered to you either then?
I'm not going to be in the state of Arizona.
Okay. That's the answer to that. FedEx is one overnight? No. But then that's just the concern he brought up with the chain of custody. I mean, we could make this happen electronically, I guess it would be, because I'm hearing that 2 of you possibly would need that.
well, if we did it on Monday, the 30th, I will be back in person for that. It's just if we tried to do it over the weekend, that I won't be back in town yet. But on Monday, I will be able to attend in person.
I understand that. That's what I was trying to ask. I know you'll be back the 30th. That's what I was trying to get from Ms. Zimmerman when she'll be back, so we can look at trying to have everybody in person. I'm not comfortable with letting these resumes, and this is too much. It's just not standard that these get released out of the district office. There's.
Would you be back for the final interviews?
No.
Okay. At least if under this projected timeline.
Correct. And again, I don't want to hold up the district process, but I think the interviews are fine. They're, you can set up a Google Meet. We've certainly had plenty of people be virtual for meetings, but I understand the concern with the documents. So
No, you would, yeah, I would say too, there wouldn't be those concerns with someone remotely participating in an interview.
right.
A little, because you're here hearing and seeing pretty much what they hear and see.
So, Mr. President, if I may,
You may.
So what I'm hearing is the 27th, we close applications. And then to hopefully have Ms. Schmidt here present, the screenings take place on Monday, the 30th. And then on the 2nd, July 2nd, that Wednesday, we would be looking at candidate interviews and selection. Is that kind of the timeline we're looking at?
That's possible. As I'm looking at this and I'm hearing Mr. Jordan speak, you've got some people that you've already spoke to about this.
I indicated that this was a possibility. Are you interested? And Dr. Ty talked to a couple of them as well. And
So-
they said, yes, they had interest. So
What if we sped up the they should be getting ready to go. If they're interested, you're going to start communicating with them now. What if we did the timeline to end 12 noon on the 25th and we had a screening meeting on the 26th? Would everybody be able to make that one? Oh, you're out. You're out on the 26th.
Yeah, sorry, I'm out of town from the 24th to the 29th.
Mr. President, may I?
You may.
Yeah, it sucks, but I think what Vice President Kenyon said might work. I felt bad that Ms. Zimmerman might miss the screening section, but to keep the ball rolling, I think we might have to go that route.
I mean, I would still participate and like listen to the discussion and, you know, have the potential to, again,
Virtually, yeah.
yeah, find a way to project the document or something like that. Miss Camerata will be back.
the people we got to talk to about.
Yeah. So I still plan on attending virtually. Either way.
I just wasn't sure if projecting it was an issue with like potential screen grabbing and stuff.
I mean, I think in executive session that is protected anyway, that we can't discuss. So,
Security of pretty good with it. Assuming they don't even know this meeting is going on, outsiders. I guess they know this meeting is going on because it's
They're,
posted.
they're actually watching it online. People can watch all of our meetings online. Executive session, not,
No,
but
right,
general
that's one
meetings.
reason.
Right.
right.
Because then you can have a frank discussion.
All right, let's, I think maybe it's best to go with the plan that we outlaid. I will make contact with legal first thing in the morning and make sure they're good with that as well. If we need to change it, we'll call virtual meeting and get it changed, or we can just make the change necessary based off what legal's saying, but I think that's gonna be
Or
our
could
only
authorize you
option.
to do that. Yeah. So what dates are we tentatively talking about now? We've surfaced a lot of them. I want to make sure I have it right.
I think we have June 30th as a screening and July 2nd as the interview.
Let me just ask the board, how many do you wish to interview?
Mr. President, if I may.
You may.
I think 4 or 5 is the number I'm landing on, but it's just an opinion.
Mr. President, I'm also looking at 4 myself.
Okay.
And I was going to say 3 to 4.
Yeah, the first number that jumped in my head was 3, but I'm good. You know, 3, 4, kind of right in there.
One of the things too is a lot of times we can't do these during the day because these folks may be doing something else. I also don't know what your work schedule is. We can do them during the day. I think that's fine, but everybody's got a work schedule as well. So I don't know if they want to take a day off work for this or if we want to do it in the evening time.
Before we move on, do we settle on 4?
I think it sounds like 4 is the magic. We got 4 to 5, 4, 3 to 4. So I was kind of 4 to 5 myself. So either one, 4 is probably, everybody likes 4.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'm okay with them being in there, starting in the early afternoon, whether it be, 4 o'clock, 4:30.
If you interview 4, I'll just give you some suggested information. Depending on how long you want to do the interviews, that makes a big difference. You want to do 4 45-minute interviews, That's one tentative schedule. 4 1-hour interviews, that's another one. You need a little break between each one just to clear your head and, you know, not long, maybe 5 minutes even, just if you're just going to power through. But that's something the board could decide as well. You can probably get 7 questions reasonably answered in 40 to 45 minutes. You can get 10 questions answered in 60 minutes. Now, some people will finish those 10 questions in minute 59. Others will be a little earlier, but just as some thoughts about the time.
I think the last time we did hour interviews and we blocked hour and 15, so we had the transition time. So you're
So 4 of those would be 5 hours,
5 hours plus
not counting discussion.
some discussion afterwards. An hour.
And that might,
You're
in
looking at
my
6.5.
experience, sometimes that discussion is substantial.
Right. I think we're looking at probably 7 to 8 hour day.
Mr. President,
Yes,
did you feel like an hour was too long? Do you feel like it was right?
it was. We were pushing an hour every time.
Yeah, as was stated, and one of the other things to consider as well is they each will have their own time to be here for their interview, and so you know you could have somebody, and we have had where we had an hour block for them, and they answered all the questions very quickly. We had time left over, but we couldn't start the next one until the next person's time.
And I could ask them
there.
to be here 15 minutes in advance, let's say. Just, I've done that too, just especially when they have to drive, when I've been in Winslow and they're driving up from the Phoenix area. I've said, you know, plan to be 15 to 30 minutes early just in case there's traffic issues, so.
I don't think you need to tell them that. That's part of the interview process.
Yeah.
Early is on time is late. If you've got to tell them to be early for a job
Yeah.
interview, I don't want them.
No, okay. No,
I mean, they should be
thinking
sitting
of
in the
myself,
car
I
in
was
the parking
always
lot an hour
sitting, I
before.
was sitting in the car.
Right. If they're not that
Look
person,
at Data, a
Right.
half hour ahead of time, 45 minutes at a time.
So, Mr. President, looking at that, I think I'd be okay with starting at around noon then.
This would be around noon on the July 2nd, to Wednesday, July 2nd. That would give us a pretty good amount of time.
does that work for everybody else?
It should.
Okay. Board Member Schmidt Zimmerman,
Yeah, I should probably be able to make that work.
I'll make it work.
okay. So we'll do July 2nd at noon, starting at noon. Okay, do you need any, what's our next step for you?
The screening?
Screening.
The screening meeting then is June 30th? Has that been decided, or is it, yeah, Sunday, that's Monday, June 30th?
30th. What time do you guys want to do that one at?
How long do we think those normally?
Kind of depends on how many we have.
Yeah, and that takes, if you review each application carefully, even if I shorten them a bit, takes 20 to 30 minutes apiece. I've had some boards, maybe you want to consider this, most boards score them individually. I've had one board that had a very successful search, and they all had the paper in front of them, but they together went through each one. They scored their things separately, but because sometimes one person is taking 10 minutes per application and someone else is taking 40 minutes per application, then everybody's finished except one person, and they could wait a half hour or more for that person to finish. I've had that experience, so depending on, that would assist, if Ms. Zimmerman were present, that would assist her virtually reviewing each candidate together, not necessarily discussing it, but just In that case, they discussed it actually too, but that's just another different format. It doesn't violate any legal requirements. But then you would have each applicant's information up on the screen, looking at it together. Just, some people read more quickly than others. Some people are more interested. For example, do you want the application to include their transcripts? Normally, that's something we require. Sometimes they're very lengthy because you're talking bachelor's, some cases a couple masters and a doctorate. And most people don't, to be honest, don't find those that illuminating. Because these generally are people who have been successful educationally, and you're looking at a lot of A's and B's. You're not looking at, D- in school finance.
Yeah.
I mean, so if we omit that speeds, the real only reason I would omit that is if someone's going to request an official copy of their transcript.
It takes time.
First week in July, those public institutions are not going to be, or the end of June, they are not going to be real responsive.
Yeah, if I may, when you mentioned transcript, I kind of chuckled because requesting a transcript can take a long time, which seems crazy because everything is digital now, but it still does. And personally, I don't feel like I need to look at someone's transcripts if they've already been working successfully as a superintendent. Their grades in their undergrad are really insignificant to me at this point. Maybe if it was a first job out of college, I'd be curious at their level, but later on, I would not need to see that. So I'd be fine with removing that and being able to speed it up a bit by removing that.
See, we could speed it up also by removing the requirement for letters and saying, we want, and I would do those initial calls. We want 3 people who can be readily responsive to a phone call.
I had a kind of a question about the references. So, there was a comment made earlier about, they may not want their employer to know. But I do think their most recent work experience is important and something we require, like as a district, that we are able to contact your current employer. And so I understand that they may not want to, but at the same time, I feel like that work experience is important. And finding out things like, they're on FMLA or something of that nature, we need to know that information.
So typically what's been done with that is we don't do a background on their current employer until such time we're ready to offer them a position. And then we would say, we're interested in offering you this position pending your reference from your current employer. Because at that point, they're ready to leave and they have a job with us. If their employer says, goodbye, you're looking somewhere else, you're gone. We don't want to put somebody out of a job in the process of doing this one.
But
But
many
that's
of
not,
them,
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
interject just briefly, many of them thinking, at least 5 of them are retired, and so their previous employer would be whatever district they were in. I don't think they would have a big issue with that. There are 2 who have been superintendents out of state who are currently now employed as like assistant soup for HR or something in state here, so I don't know how they would.
Right, and that's just the
Feel
ones you
about
know
that.
about, but we don't know if we open this up.
Right,
We might
you
get
don't know.
20
We might
more that
not
we
get
don't know.
anybody. I want it.
So typically we do that last final check upon an employment offer.
Some of them will have their
pending?
current employer as a reference.
I guess my concern is if we go through all of this and get through the, contract negotiations, and then it's kind of like we don't, the discussion, well, you don't want to have a background check that you don't have back yet because you don't want to interview them if something comes up. It's the same thing for me with the employer. If you don't do the reference check of their current employer and you go through the whole process, you choose them, you go through all the contract negotiations, and then you contact them, and then their concern arises, and we're at square one.
I mean, every job interview I've ever seen has a box that says, can we contact your current reference? And as I've interviewed many people, it always says no, and then they typically write upon job offer, but they don't necessarily want their current job to know they're looking. So, and yes, there's been a couple times where I've hired people or plan to hire somebody, They had excellent background checks from the previous 2 or 3 employers. And when we called their current one after we said we're ready to make an offer to you, their current one said, not a good choice. And then we did kind of come back to ground zero. But I think you scare some people off if they're if we're gonna contact their employer now, especially in Arizona where there's right to work issues and those things. And maybe even one of these current candidates is doing a different job outside of education, and they're retired, they're doing whatever, they're happy with that. They don't want to lose it, but they are fearful of that if the employer knows they're out searching for another job.
We do have a spot in the application which says names of finalists will be released to the public.
Right.
Often there's no public really to release them to necessarily. Sometimes there's no newspaper panting for that information, but that lets them know if you get to be a finalist, we could be contacting anybody.
Would those names be in the agenda for us conducting interviews?
They would be once at the end of the screening meeting, once you've decided whom to do, then
They would be in the motion.
there would be a motion in public to, usually, yeah, with that motion. Sometimes I've held it over to the next day to you take the minutes, but don't release them till the next day. So I have a chance to, after the screening meeting, to call these people and say, they want to interview you, your name's going to be released. And so then the next day, I usually like to give them a heads up.
Yeah, I mean, we do broadcast our meetings, so that wouldn't be possible. You know what I mean? If we make the motion, it's going to be live.
I've had people do that. We make a motion to ratify the decision we made in executive session, and those minutes will be available with the information the next day. Sometimes you can say that and just,
Again, for me, I want it to be transparent, so either I would want the names in the motion or the names on the agenda for who we're interviewing.
so,
Well, I think we can what my plan is to follow legal's advice on that. They're the ones that are going to know best. So we'll follow what legal tells us to do if we're going to name them, or we have to name the finalists. That's a law. When we name them, we'll follow legal's advice on that. Will be the best.
I could, if you took a 10-minute break or something, or 15-minute break, I could just call them right. If they're in the application process, they're going to be, I could just call and say, they want to interview you. Are you willing to be interviewed? We're going to release your name, and then go ahead, take a little break after all the screening, come back in 10 minutes, and that would probably be enough time for me to call however many you have left.
Okay. Well, I'll consult with legal
Yeah,
and find out how
see
they
if
want us to
that's-
handle that. We'll
So
go from
you're
there.
aware of those
Okay.
options.
Mr. President,
Yes.
so we're still looking at a time for the 30th. Ms. Schmidt, you're going to be, is there a specific time that works for you? I know that's kind of when you get back.
I get back on Sunday, so I will be anytime on Monday, but I do have a day job. So, early afternoon is fine. I would not like to start at like noon. 3:30 is fine, 4:30, whatever. Kind of our normal times would be great. But again, I can try and work around whatever I need to.
Mr. Sarson.
I need to be after at least 12:30, so early afternoon work best for me also.
If you did 3:30, let's say you're screening 5 or 6 applications, I think you would want to get started by 3:30. Just so you don't screen 4 or 5 and and then somebody gets not as much consideration because everybody's worn out.
Does 3:30 work for everybody on June 30th? Okay. We'll plan on 3:30.
Mr. President,
Yes.
So at that screening meeting, is that where we will give you the like themes for questions for the interviews? Okay.
I mean, I could do that right now if you wanted me to, but sometimes you want to tailor that to who the candidates are as well. But
Yeah, I'd prefer to have time to think about it.
Mr. President, if I could ask for another clarification.
Yes, sir.
So on the requirements for the applicants, I've heard pretty clearly we want district superintendent experience. Then we also put some other things in there, usually current Arizona superintendent certificate or ability to attain one. Doctorate degree from an accredited university, preferred or required?
I think preferred.
Most boards go with preferred.
Yeah.
Which says, you know what, that might become a difference at the end if somebody has it and somebody doesn't. But 5 years teaching experience in a public school system?
Are we going to get to administrative experience? Is that just one of the,
No. Then 3 years principal or building level administrator experience, and then district superintendent experience. So that's a box that not everybody can, there might be some people interested and they can't check that box of superintendent experience.
okay.
But, and it's up to the board, of course. I think it's necessary that someone actually have taught, because, and been a principal. I mean, if you've been a principal, you know what reality is. I mean, so,
Board member Shinziani, do you have a question?
Yeah, those requirements sound good to me.
and then the only one that's required of all of those is fingerprint verification from the state of Arizona, their fingerprint card. Which, you don't have to have any of those other ones to be a superintendent in Arizona, but you do have to have that by the law.
I think another one that in Arizona, given the way funding is done, I think we need somebody who has a strong financial background as well.
Educational finance.
However you want to word it.
School district.
I mean, school district finance is different than everything else, so I think it's important that they understand it, but it's completely different. That's,
They've been a superintendent. Unless they were just delegated to everybody, which I would not recommend. You have a good business manager, but you better know enough to ask the right questions.
okay, what more do you need from us, Mr. Jornstad?
So we can deal with the questions after the meeting, after the screening meeting. I will put together the position listing. Normally, for a non-interim position, I would also put in a lot of information about the district, their schools, the number of students, the demographic information, and so on. We're not really, because often you're trying to sell a district to people out of state, to people in state, but I don't see that that's what we're doing here. We're really looking at a very narrow group. So I won't put that in. I'll put in a couple general statements about the district, but a good candidate, if they don't know about that information, they will search it out and get informed.
One more thing I think the candidate should be familiar with is Title I. It's Title I schools.
Mr. President, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
On the, option gold plan that we've kind of tweaked a little bit, if for some reason the contract negotiations move quicker, could we, reconvene a meeting and vote on the contract and then allow them to start sooner?
Yeah, that would be something in contract negotiations. I think you would talk to the person and say, we'd really love to have you start. Where you're nearing the cost final decision, you're not disagreeing. We'd love to have you start July 14th.
Okay.
Do you need a salary range for this position?
That's it. Yeah, that's my other one. Salary range. And are we, there's a couple ways of looking at that. Are we seeking salary range as if it were like for an entire year? Or you just basically then say the salary range is 150 to 180 or something like that? Or do you want to say, I've got some suggested information. Maybe I don't. Okay. So what I have down here is the salary range for this position is, and I have a blank there. The actual salary for the successful candidate to be determined during contract negotiations will be based on experience, professional preparation, and duration of the interim superintendent service. If you went with something, maybe we can just put a general range down and that can be worked out in conference information. But if you assume you might have a new superintendent prior to July 1, might be something we say something like to be salary range of this or such and such a month. And then you serve so many months and
I'd personally would be in favor of doing something per month so that it gives us the flexibility if we find someone that we're not paying two people. So that would be my preference.
the other decision you'd have to make is I usually put this statement in. The district offers a competitive benefits package that will be finalized during contract negotiations. Doesn't promise health insurance or anything like that, but it could include that or it could not include that. People who are retired often have those kind of arrangements made already.
Whoops, Mr. President.
Vice President, go ahead.
Yeah, I think pretty much all that stuff is going to be determined during the contract negotiations. So what are you looking for right now as for salary range, like a minimum, maximum? Or
That's what we often use, but we're usually talking about a whole year worth of service. So it varies from, I've had small rural districts where it's been much lower, and I've had larger districts or more challenging districts where it's been like 150 to 180, 140 to 160, 130 to 150. It really depends on and what the district is used to paying, and if you're in a competitive environment where you're really competing with qualified applicants. I don't think we're in such a competitive environment right now. I mean, people either want an interim position or they don't, and so.
yeah, my thoughts are similar with Ms. Zimmerman, but I would like the idea for the contract to be for the 1 year is the length of the contract. However, it's basically, if we end up severing it earlier, they get paid for the months. So whatever that looks like obviously would be worked out in contract negotiations, but I think the range is going to be focused on the year.
Okay. So what's a comfortable range for you?
What do you think is a good range for the district, our size district?
Without having, well, for example, with the Blue Ridge listing, which is, they're maybe a little smaller, but they're rural, but it was very competitive. That was like 150 to 175, I think. Winslow, small district, not really comparable to this one. I did Prescott a couple, 2.5 years ago already, I guess. There we said 130 to 155, but I happen to know that they got a candidate they really liked, and I think that they ended up paying closer to 160 because they, during contract negotiations, they were really happy with the person they got. And Prescott would be somewhat, although they're unified, so that brings a whole different scope of, then you're dealing with high school issues, which is a complex factor.
Yeah, personally, I like the 130 to 155.
That's considerably lower than what we've paid in the past, and we've been told we couldn't get anybody for that before. I think we're going to need you to help us a little bit.
No, let's see. So let's say 10,000 a month would be 120.
Yeah,
That's too
a
low.
$180,000 a year contract turns out to be $15,000 a month.
You could go 150 to 180. I think in Maricopa County, it's more expensive. And I have no idea what you were paying your previous superintendents, but
That's why I wanted your professional opinion without giving you that information.
I mean, you've got Litchfield around you. You've got the Tolleson districts, both of which, both Union and Elementary, pay fairly well. Littleton, that they were paying around 180, 190. Their superintendent that they had for 10 years or plus just retired, but
Just trying to look at a study that came out to see somebody. published-
ASBA used to collect that data, and they really did a good job of it. But the last few years, they've had very few. They just haven't had the responses that they used to get. You know, when you say the average is this, and 30 districts responded out of 200, well, that average doesn't mean much then. I used to know what everybody made when I was head of ASA because they would call me for advice on that, but I've been out of that for 3 years, so I'm not quite as.
And for an interim position versus a permanent, where do you typically find that the wage range is?
You're paying them a shorter amount of time, but you want to pay enough to entice someone who's retired to say, you know what, I could work for 6 or 7 months and really add security to my retirement years. And so that's why I was thinking of what did you say was for 180,000?
$180,000 a month
$15,000 a month.
is $15,000 a month. But I think that's the contract we offered our superintendent about 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
No, that was, the previous one was making that much as well.
You want it to be a range that's enticing enough to retired people, as I said. That's why the bottom number's got to be 150 or more. But this, again, depending on experience, all these people have the experience. They've all, if we get the people we're looking for, they've all been teachers, they've all been principals, they've all been superintendents, been successful. Some of them were the ones I'm familiar with who worked in the Valley these last few years. They were probably, some of them were from a little larger districts. They probably were earning around 200,000 if you added in benefits and things. Sometimes the salary itself looks lower, but then there's certain benefits, annuities, and other things which
So our superintendent contract that was signed on September 13th of 2021 had a base pay of $177,210.
That's after she worked for us for 4 years.
Not arguing that, I'm just saying that's the current cost of the day. And then there were annuities. I'm pulling up the previous one from that as well, or the one after that.
The interim, that the board signed for the previous superintendent was 180.
180?
Yes.
That number would be attractive to people if you said 180. You want to give a range, or would you rather say approximately? You want to say a range, then
I think a range. I think let's go 150 to 180.
No, I agree with that.
then they know they're getting, if they do 180, they're getting the top of the range, which there's a certain psychological feeling. And if you offer 150 to some of these people, I don't know all of them, I know some of them, they would have to think about whether it'd be, they really want to jump back into the, I'm going to say the fire, because it's a fire. It can be a good fire, but sometimes you can get singed pretty well too. Is there a board consensus?
Yeah, I would feel comfortable doing a range and 150 to 180 with the knowledge that, you know, we're probably getting people that are going to be on the higher end since they are more experienced. But having that wiggle room there, at least to open it up.
Mr. President, did I sense hesitation on your part?
No, I think that's fine. I'm concerned at the 150 mark. I think to echo your comments, that might be hard to
Yeah.
entice somebody out. That's just the going rate. And it's, since these last contracts were negotiated, costs have gone considerably higher in Maricopa County. So that's my, you get what you pay for sometimes.
The
I
bottom of
mean,
the
yeah, I was gonna, would you feel more comfortable saying 160 to 180 or 160 to 185 so that the range is slightly different?
Yeah, I think that might be a little better.
I mean, it's not really that significant of a difference, but you know, it's like when you list your house and you listed for a little bit less than the whole number and it looks better to people. But
Agree.
yeah, it's a mental thing.
I mean, I just know what the job entails, and $150,000.
No,
I know there's people that are watching that are going to say, you're crazy, even considering paying that much. But this is not an easy job.
and those people don't know
And
what
we
the
have a
job
lot of
is.
expectations, and
And it's 24/7. It literally, I've
be.
lived that. It is 24/7 because
it
you
is
can be
for
home
most.
on a Saturday afternoon and get a phone call and you look at who the call is coming from and you're like, this is not good. You know, your maintenance director is calling on Saturday afternoon, not to chit chat about how your weekend's going, not to tell you there's a broken faucet somewhere. No, that's to tell you like power's blowing out for our main high school and we have to cancel school on Monday.
Mr. President?
Okay.
You may.
Yeah, I'm not stuck on 150. I just don't want to go any higher than 185 and just kind of throw a range so we have wiggle room. But I'm not stuck on 150 to 180. But I like to stay around 180 as the max.
So I'm hearing some of you interested in 160 to 185.
I'm fine with that.
I would say that I'm fine. Maybe talk to Mr. Ty or Dr. Ty tomorrow and make sure he feels that's going to pull people in. If
Yeah,
it's not,
because
we
he's
need to
more
get everybody
up
back
on what the
together.
current pay is. Because
Right.
when you're in that, that's the job I had, and you're really involved in all of that much more intimately. So, if he has significant concerns, should I give you a call and let you?
Yeah, I think you should. I mean, I don't want, we're on a tight deadline,
Yeah.
so we need
No,
to
I know.
reconvene
Yep.
quickly if that range is not going to work.
Okay.
And even if you talk to some of the candidates, I'm sure you're going to start maybe even calling them tonight or tomorrow first thing and say, this is
Yeah,
coming open. Float that number. If that's not working, then we need to reconvene quickly.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I would just ask that, you know, if something comes up, that if you could please email the whole board so that we're all aware of things that are happening, that would be super appreciated.
think I have the information that I need. Heard no one objecting to trimming the application a little bit and not, so it's a little, okay. You want essay questions in the application? I mean, it's a lot easier for a candidate to apply without doing them, but
What's your opinion?
I think you want one sample of their writing. Normally, we have 2 or 3, or some districts even want 4, but we could list it down to something like, why are you a good fit for the Liberty Elementary School District interim position? And then you get to see how they write, what they think about.
Yeah, I think that before you said one, that was where my head went. Like one question that, you know, is going to get us our best answer from them. I agree with you. Being able to see somebody's writing, I think, tells you a lot about them, and their ability to communicate clearly, which is a huge task for this job. So I think one question is probably fine. I liked the one that you gave as an example. It gives them an opportunity to discuss themselves and why they could see themselves here and how they could help us. So I would be all for the one question that you gave.
I give a 200-word limit, and the software stops them at
Yeah,
that.
it cuts you off. Also, I appreciate the word limit, because being able to say things concisely is also critical.
Okay. So I think I have my marching orders. My next steps will be communicate with the potential candidates, develop this position profile completely with your information, call the candidates, potential candidates, but we'll list this as quickly as we can as well. So when we list it, it'll go out, in this case, in-state, it'll go out to the 1,500 members of the Arizona School Administrators, which includes about 200 current and retired superintendents. And then it's amazing how that word spreads as well, but we'll use a few other professional organizations as well. It'll be up on our website, which frequently gets looked at because our website is where people go to see those listings, what's out there. And we list not only superintendent positions, but we could put it on the Department of Education. We haven't had the issue with that. It's not really an issue, is ASA is not allowed to list positions on the ADE website. That's more helpful for people out of state who don't know where to look, so they go to the Department of Education. It would have to be listed by Liberty personnel.
We can do that if the board wants it. We can definitely have that done. You'll have to point us in the right direction, I'm sure, but we can.
Yeah, I would send
can do
you
it for the
a
district.
file. And
Okay.
well, no, you know what? On that, you know, you listed a court. They have they ask you questions and you put in.
We can have our human resources department post there if you think it's valuable. If it's not,
I don't think it's valuable for an in-state group we're not looking for out-of-state candidates, are we?
No.
I mean, I wouldn't turn one down if it showed up, but there's a whole, just because of what you said about education finance earlier, it's not only complex, but it's different in every state and drastically different. Somebody who comes in as an intern, it takes them a year to figure out the Arizona education finance system, and you don't have a year. So I would say that's not worth bothering with.
I'm comfortable taking your advice on that. Everybody else? Okay. All right. Nothing else for you?
No.
Okay, members, I set this on the agenda as an action item if we needed to take action. I don't know that we do. He has his marching orders. If you feel comfortable making a motion to approve the direction we've given to ASA and Dr. Jornstead, then we can do that as well. I don't think it matters either way.
Yeah, President Todd, I kind of typed out a motion here.
Okay.
So I make a motion to approve ASA to proceed with the Liberty Elementary School District interim search as discussed in this meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, the second was by Zimmerman?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you, Board Member Zimmerman. We have the motion, the second. We'll take a, there's no further discussion, which I can't imagine there is at this point, but perhaps. We'll call for the vote. Board Member Schmidt,
Aye.
Board Member Zimmerman,
Aye.
Vice President Kenyon,
Aye.
Board Member Strencioni.
Aye.
I'm also, and I will show that that item passed with a 5 yes, 0 no vote for item 3.3. Thank you, Mr. Jornstead.
Thank you. Appreciate your confidence.
Members, next is 4.1, board comments on agenda topics and items for future consideration. Anything that we didn't catch in the most recent?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I have two things. I'd like to have the board look at the discipline matrix to ensure that it aligns with the new board policies.
Okay.
And I'd like to bring back the open enrollment transportation policy, please.
Okay. Open enrollment transportation policy, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I apologize, I don't have the number.
That's okay. We don't expect you to know them by heart quite yet. By the next meeting, perhaps, but not this one. Okay. Anything else from anybody? Members, I received a phone call today from a board member over in the Buckeye High School District. We talked, and once upon a time, the Liberty District and the high school board would meet about once a year in a joint meeting just to discuss different things and what could they do to help us out, what we can do to help them out. I would like to ask you to consider that. We can bring it up for a future agenda topic, but it's kind of interesting to do a joint meeting. Two boards come together, they both have to call their meetings together, but that has happened many years ago, and some people who are in the community for a long time remember it, and that discussion came up today. So unless anybody's opposed to that, we'll probably get that added to an agenda item here in the future and discuss that in a little more detail. Otherwise, we have our upcoming board meetings, mainly we've got a couple more now that are coming up, but what we had was July 14th for a regular board meeting. And then we're going to look for a June, what are we doing, June 30th now? And July,
Second.
Yep. June 30th at 3:30
yep,
and July 2nd starting at noon.
okay. We'll get both of those added as well. With that, if there's nothing else for item 5.1, we'll show our meeting adjourned at 7:17 p.m.